Has anyone ever been to a wedding that didn't end with the couple getting married? If so, what happened? How did the guests react? One of my distant relatives. The groom got really drunk and hit his fiancée in the face in front of everyone. I was young and didn't really get what was going on. I just remember my uncle laying the groom out with one punch. They managed to get married, but then she hopped in a car with some random dude. I was confused, asked my buddy what was going on. He explained that dude was driving her down to the honeymoon spot because she didn't like the way he, her husband of 3 minutes, drove. 2 days later I found out that once my friend made it to the cabin for their honeymoon, he walked in on them in the shower together. She then revealed that she only married him so her parents would get off her back, that she hated him and was shacking up with this guy the whole week instead. They'd tell everyone it wasn't working out once they got back in town and all. My friend was obviously devastated by this and has never recovered. That's the definition of a cunt. She went even further. While he was still in shock, she demanded his keys from him so she could retrieve the good vodka they'd got as a wedding gift from his trunk. This is one of those internet stories I'm just gonna choose not to believe if I'm ever going to want to date again. Not exactly, but I did know a couple who, the night before their city hall wedding, both had separate big parties and got so wasted they both slept through the wedding. They didn't realize it until City Hall called asking where they were, and they decided fuck it, we'll do it later. They did eventually get married, and still are as far as I know, over 20 years later. Sounds like they were made for each other. The groom ran away in the morning of his wedding day. He contacted his family after 2 days and told them he's in another country and doesn't want to get married yet. His family pressured him into marrying a woman who he'd only known for 2 weeks. The bride was very upset, but she and her family understood the situation and moved on. Sounds like they were Indian. The groom's family was Indian. They pressured him into an arranged marriage, and the guy just went with it until he snapped and ran away. What about the bride's family? They were American. The bride had no idea that it was a forced marriage. She genuinely loved him and was heartbroken, but eventually understood his situation and moved on. Not sure what the groom's doing today, but the bride married someone else later and had 2 twin boys last year, so all's well for her. This happened around 20 years ago. I am Indian and was supposed to get married to a guy who was a close family friend. That guy was nice and all, but on the wedding day, he ran with my sister. Yes, you guys read it right, he ran away with my younger sister. So my entire family was very upset and claimed his younger brother as compensation. I got married to his younger brother. Marriage has turned out superb, like one of those dream marriages you see on TV. But yes, the marriage was an accident. And your family got both brothers. Both the guys were kind of a catch. The family meetings were kinda awkward. It took my younger sister some 10 years to stop feeling guilty. Last wedding I went to, the groom was doing oxys with his friend in the back room right before the ceremony. He could barely walk down the aisle and he passed out before they could get through their vows. The bride and her mom left crying. They actually got married for real like 2 weeks later and now have a 2-year-old. Did he sober up? I mean, I can't condone the taking of oxys, but if he had done it to chill out due to anxiety and accidentally took too much, that's one thing. If he has a huge problem with them, that marriage is already on a shaky foundation. If you take OxyContin for anxiety, you already have a huge problem. My older brother got married to his girlfriend of 10 years. At the end of the party, when I and most of my brother's family had left, it all kicked off. Turns out she and my brother's best friend planned, for 3 years, for the marriage to happen so she could divorce him and take the house and live in it with the guy she'd been banging behind my brother's back. Little did she know that the house was in my dad's name, and not my brother's. They have the exact same name. She was entitled to nothing. Last I heard, her family abandoned her, and so did her boyfriend after she put on lots of weight. Yes, mine. We went to the States for our wedding. All went well, and the day after the ceremony we went downtown to the government office to get all the official paperwork. The woman helping us didn't know quite how to process our Canadian IDs, etc., so we ended up dealing with the department honcho. Filled everything out, signed on all the lines, gave them our address, and flew home a couple days later. We waited for a month or so to receive our paperwork in the mail, but it never came. I called the government office and got the runaround for 20 minutes before finally being told they had no record of mine nor my husband's name, our identification, or our paperwork. When I asked what I could do from a different country, they had no ideas. We are going to get married again, I suppose, but I really didn't want to get married in this city. It's weird, I never saw myself getting married, and now that I am, I'm not. I've got one along these lines. My fiancé's cousin had a shotgun wedding about 12 years ago. When they went to divorce 2 years ago, they went in with the paperwork and discovered that there was no record of them ever getting married in the system. When they went through their files at home, they found the copy of the marriage license they were supposed to have mailed in a decade prior. Divorce over. My wife forgot our marriage license at her mom's house. So, technically we weren't married until the Monday after the wedding. Does this count? My wife forgot our marriage license at her mom's house. Sounds like somebody really didn't want that marriage to go ahead. You're right. She notoriously loses everything. Only person I know who can lose the keys between the house and car. My friend was getting married, and the man she was marrying had a heart attack literally right before the ceremony, after everyone had arrived. Of course everyone was shocked, but they got married shortly after at the registry office. So it was still a happy ending, I guess. While I haven't been an official guest at a dramatic wedding, I did have the chance to witness one. I've told the story before, but given that it's the only such wedding I've ever seen, I'll offer it again. At the time, I was selling my services as a videographer, and I had been booked to shoot a choral performance at a local church. Although I had an assistant to help me with my second camera, I always made a point of setting things up on my own. And so I did my best to arrive at least an hour and a half before I was scheduled to start filming. On the day in question, I discovered that the church had been previously reserved for a wedding party, and so I had little choice but to wait for the service to finish. It seemed like a fairly generic ceremony. Awkwardly played organ music signaled the entrance of the procession, and as everyone took their places near the altar, things appeared to be going according to plan. Then, the time came for the bride to make her appearance. The doors opened, and there she was, smiling radiantly as she shuffled up the aisle. She was a large, in both the tall and broad senses, woman who could have been anywhere from 25 to 45, and I found myself wondering why she wasn't being accompanied by anyone. Perhaps, I reasoned, she simply didn't have a father, or maybe she had decided to do away with that particular tradition. The truth, as it turned out, was a little bit less benign. As the priest began his speech, that same, dearly beloved, bit that you see in the movies, a man stood up in the audience. "You still have time," he shouted, and although he was quickly shushed by the woman next to him, his words seemed to have an effect. The groom, a small, frail-looking man with a ponytail, meekly held up a hand. The priest stopped talking, and though I couldn't see the bride's face, I could hear her angrily hissing something to her husband-to-be. "Excuse me," the man said. He paused, growing bright red. After a moment, he continued. "I'm sorry," he said. He murmured something to the woman in white, offered a few words to the best man, and then promptly fainted. Now, at first I figured that the groom had suffered some sort of medical event, and that the wedding would continue. My assumption was quickly proven false as the best man literally picked up his friend and strutted down the aisle, saying not a word to anybody. Throughout the entire scene, everyone was completely silent, until at last the bride found her voice. "I hate you all!" she shrieked. She stormed away from the altar, and nobody followed her, not even a bridesmaid. For a few seconds, everyone sat in shock until the man from before stood up again. "I'm sorry for wasting everyone's time," he said. "You're all still welcome to come to the reception." The crowd started to clear out after that, with everyone whispering to each other. From what I was able to figure out, it seemed like the bride had more or less bullied the groom into the idea of marriage as a means of curing his homosexuality. The man who had spoken up was actually the bride's father, which didn't bode well for their next family gathering. I even overheard a few attendees claim that the groom wasn't actually gay, but that he had claimed to be when he had tried to break up with his domineering girlfriend. All in all, it was rather like being caught in the middle of a soap opera's finale. You can imagine how hard I mentally kicked myself when I realized that I could have filmed it. This happened in Calcutta, Kolkata, and my dad was present. We live in Canada. The couple had been introduced to each other, and after like 6 months of hanging out and getting to know each other, they got engaged. They had known each other for almost a year up to this point. These are well-off people who are upper income range, so it's not the village or anything, just to set the tone correctly. There had been events the day before the actual wedding ceremony, which about 500 plus people attended, and of course people talk, hence word got out. The evening of the wedding a group of people showed up and literally blocked the streets so the groom couldn't come to the wedding venue. The groom had been dating, a female of said blockade family under the promise of getting married, even introducing himself to her parents and family, planning a future date for his parents to meet hers. Mind you, all 500 plus, the guests had arrived and witnessed this. For about an hour there was a standoff, and the information got back to the venue bride and her family, and they called off the wedding. The guests were half in shock, half trying to eat and drink as much as they could before the inevitable cancellation happened. The bride's family actually took the matter to court, expenses of the wedding and such, and the guy settled out of court with them. As well the bride and her parents, personally went out and returned all the gifts they received. My dad didn't allow them to return the gifts he had given them, and told her to keep them all, due to the circumstances. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.